Chapter 11 Public Goods and Common Resources. An old song lyric maintains that the best things in life are free. A moment's thought reveals a long list of goods that the songwriter could have had in mind. Nature provides some of them, such as rivers, mountains, beaches, lakes, and oceans. The government provides others, such as playgrounds, parks, and parades. In each case, people do not pay a fee when they choose to enjoy the benefit of the good. Goods without prices provide a special challenge for economic analysis. Most goods in our economy are allocated in markets in which buyers pay for what they receive and sellers are paid for what they provide. For these goods, prices are the signals that guide the decisions of buyers and sellers, and these decisions lead to an efficient allocation of resources. When goods are available free of charge, however, the market forces that normally allocate resources in our economy are absent. In this chapter, we examine the problems that arise from the allocation of resources when there are goods without market prices. Our analysis will shed light on one of the 10 principles of economics in Chapter 1. Governments can sometimes improve market outcomes. When a good does not have a price attached to it, private markets cannot ensure that the good is produced and consumed in the proper amounts. In such cases, government policy can potentially remedy the market failure and increase economic well-being. 11-1 The different kinds of goods. Well, how well do markets work in providing the goods that people want? The answer to this question depends on the good being considered. As we discussed in Chapter 7, a market can provide the efficient number of ice cream cones. The price of ice cream cones adjusts to balance supply and demand, and this equilibrium maximizes the sum of producer and consumer surplus. Yet, as we discussed in Chapter 10, the market cannot be counted on to prevent aluminum manufacturers from polluting the air we breathe. Buyers and sellers in a market typically do not take into account the external effects of their decisions. Thus, markets work well when the good is ice cream, but they work badly when the good is clean air. In thinking about the various goods in the economy, it is useful to group them according to two characteristics. One, is the good excludable? That is, can people be prevented from using the good? Is the good rival in consumption? That is, does one person's use of the good reduce another person's ability to use it? Using these two characteristics, Figure 1 divides goods into 4 categories. 1. Private goods are both excludable and rival in consumption. Consider an ice cream cone, for example. An ice cream cone is excludable because it is possible to prevent someone from eating one. You just don't give it to her. An ice cream cone is rival in consumption because if one person eats an ice cream cone, another person cannot eat the same cone. Most goods in the economy are private goods like ice cream cones. You don't get one unless you pay for it, and once you have it, you are the only person who benefits. When we analyze supply and demand in chapters 4 through 6 and the efficiency of markets in chapters 7 through 9, we implicitly assume that goods were both excludable and rival in consumption. 2. Public goods are neither excludable nor rival in consumption. That is, people cannot be prevented from using a public good, and one person's use of a public good does not reduce another person's ability to use it. For example, a tornado siren in a small town is a public good. Once the siren sounds, it is impossible to prevent any single person from hearing it, so it is not excludable. Moreover, when one person gets the benefit of the warning, She does not reduce the benefit to anyone else, so it is not rival in consumption. 3. Common resources are rival in consumption, but not excludable. For example, fish in the ocean are rival in consumption. When one person catches a fish, there are fewer fish for the next person to catch. Yet these fish are not an excludable good because given the vast size of an ocean, it is difficult to stop fishermen from taking fish out of it. 4. Club goods are excludable, but not rival in consumption. For instance, consider fire protection in a small town. It is easy to exclude someone from using this good. The fire department can just let her house burn down. Yet, fire protection is not rival in consumption. Once a town has paid for the fire department, the additional cost of protecting one more house is small. We discuss club goods again in Chapter 15, where we see that they are one type of natural monopoly. Although Figure 1 offers a clean separation of goods into 4 categories, the boundaries between the categories are sometimes fuzzy. Whether goods are excludable or rival in consumption is often a matter of degree. Fish in an ocean may not be excludable because monitoring fishing is so difficult, but a large enough Coast Guard could make fish at least partially excludable. Similarly, although fish are generally rival in consumption, this would be less true if the population of fishermen were small relative to the population of fish. Think of North American fishing waters before the arrival of European settlers. For purposes of our analysis, however, it would be helpful to group goods into these 4 categories. In this chapter, we examine goods that are not excludable. Public goods and common resources. Because people cannot be prevented from using these goods, they are available to everyone free of charge. The study of public goods and common resources is closely related to the study of externalities. For both of these types of goods, externalities arise because something of value has no price attached to it. If one person were to provide a public good, such as a tornado siren, other people would be better off. They would receive a benefit without paying for it, a positive externality. Similarly, when one person uses a common resource, such as the fish in the ocean, other people are worse off because there are fewer fish to catch. They suffer a loss but are not compensated for it. A negative externality. Because of these external effects, private decisions about consumption and production can lead to an inefficient allocation of resources, and government intervention can potentially raise economic well-being. 11-2. Public goods. To understand how public goods differ from other goods and why they present problems for society, let's consider an example: a fireworks display. This good is not excludable because it is impossible to prevent someone from seeing fireworks, and it is not rival in consumption because one person's enjoyment of fireworks does not reduce anyone else's enjoyment of them. 11-2A. The free rider problem. The citizens of small-town USA like seeing fireworks on the 4th of July. Each of the town's 500 residents places a $10 value on the experience for a total benefit of $5,000. The cost of putting on a fireworks display is $1,000. Because the $5,000 benefit exceeds the $1,000 cost, it is efficient for a small town to have a fireworks display on the 4th of July. Would the private market produce the efficient outcome? Probably not. Imagine that Ellen, a small town entrepreneur, decided to put on a fireworks display. Ellen would surely have trouble selling tickets to the event because her potential customers would quickly figure out that they could see the fireworks even without a ticket. Because fireworks are not excludable, people have an incentive to be free riders. A free rider is a person who receives the benefit of a good but does not pay for it. Because people would have an incentive to be free riders rather than ticket buyers, the market would fail to provide the efficient outcome. One way to view this market failure is that it arises because of an externality. If Ellen puts on the fireworks display, she confers an external benefit on those who see the display without paying for it. When deciding whether to put on the display, however, Ellen does not take the external benefits into account. Even though the fireworks display is socially desirable, it is not profitable. As a result, Ellen makes the privately rational but socially inefficient decision not to put on the display. Although the private market fails to supply the fireworks display demanded by small-town residents, the solution to small-town's problem is obvious. The local government can sponsor a 4th of July celebration. The town council can raise everyone's taxes by $2 and use the revenue to hire Ellen to produce the fireworks. Everyone in small town is better off by $8, the $10 at which residents value the fireworks minus the $2 tax bill. Ellen can help small town reach the efficient outcome as a public employee, even though she could not do so as a private entrepreneur. The story of small town is simplified but realistic. In fact, many local governments in the United States pay for fireworks on the 4th of July. Moreover, the story shows a general lesson about public goods. Because public goods are not excludable, the free rider problem prevents the private market from supplying them. The government, however, can potentially remedy the problem. If the government decides that the total benefits of a public good exceed its costs, it can provide the public good, pay for it with a tax revenue, and make everyone better off. 11-2B. Some important public goods. There are many examples of public goods. Here, we consider 3 of the most important. National defense. The defense of a country from foreign aggressors is a classic example of a public good. Once the country is defended, it is impossible to prevent any single person from enjoying the benefit of this defense. Moreover, when one person enjoys the benefit of national defense, she does not reduce the benefit to anyone else. Thus, national defense is neither excludable nor rival in consumption. National defense is also one of the most expensive public goods. In 2011, the U.S. federal government spent a total of $717 billion on national defense, more than $2,298 per person. People disagree about whether this amount is too small or too large, but almost no one doubts that some government spending for national defense is necessary. Even economists who advocate small government agree that the national defense is a public good the government should provide. Basic research. Knowledge is created through research. In evaluating the appropriate public policy toward knowledge creation, it is important to distinguish general knowledge from specific technological knowledge. Specific technological knowledge, such as the invention of a longer-lasting battery, a smaller microchip, or a better digital music player, can be patented. The patent gives the inventor the exclusive right to the knowledge she has created for a period of time. Anyone else who wants to use the patented information must pay the inventor for the right to do so. In other words, the patent makes the knowledge created by the inventor excludable. By contrast, general knowledge is a public good. For example, a mathematician cannot patent a theorem. Once a theorem is proven, the knowledge is not excludable. The theorem enters society's general pool of knowledge that anyone can use without charge. The theorem is also not rival in consumption. One person's use of the theorem does not prevent any other person from using the theorem. Profit-seeking firms spend a lot on research trying to develop new products that they can patent and sell, but they do not spend much on basic research. Their incentive instead is to free ride on the general knowledge created by others. As a result, in the absence of any public policy, society would devote too few resources to creating the new knowledge. The government tries to provide the public good of general knowledge in various ways. Government agencies such as the National Institute of Health and the National Science Foundation subsidize basic research in medicine, mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, and even economics. Some people justify government funding of the space program on the grounds that it adds to society's pool of knowledge. Determining the appropriate level of government support for these endeavors is difficult because the benefits are hard to measure. Moreover, the members of Congress who appropriate funds for research usually have little expertise in science and therefore are not in the best position to judge what lines of research will produce the largest benefits. So while basic research is surely a public good, we should not be surprised if the public sector fails to pay for the right amount and the right kinds. Fighting poverty. Many government programs are aimed at helping the poor. The welfare system, officially called TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, provides a small income for some poor families. Food stamps, officially called SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, subsidize the purchase of food for those with low incomes, and various government housing programs make shelter more affordable. These anti-poverty programs are financed by taxes paid by families that are financially more successful. Economists disagree among themselves about what role the government should play in fighting poverty. We discussed this debate more fully in Chapter 20, but here we note one important argument. Advocates of anti-poverty programs claim that the fighting poverty is a public good. Even if everyone prefers living in a society without poverty, fighting poverty is not a good that private actions will adequately provide. To see why, suppose someone tried to organize a group of wealthy individuals to try to eliminate poverty. They would be providing a public good. This good would not be rival in consumption. One person's enjoyment of living in a society without poverty would not reduce anyone else's enjoyment of it. The good would not be excludable. Once poverty is eliminated, no one can be prevented from taking pleasure in this fact. As a result, there would be a tendency for people to free ride on the generosity of others, enjoying the benefits of poverty elimination without contributing to the cause. Because of the free rider problem, eliminating poverty through private charity will probably not work, yet government action can solve this problem. Taxing the wealthy to raise the living standards of the poor can potentially make everyone better off. The poor are better off because they now enjoy a higher standard of living, and those paying the taxes are better off because they enjoy living in a society with less poverty. 11-2C. The difficult job of cost-benefit analysis. So far, we have seen that the government provides public goods because the private market on its own will not produce an efficient quantity. Yet deciding that the government must play a role is only the first step. The government must then determine what kinds of public goods to provide and in what quantities. Suppose that the government is considering a public project, such as building a new highway. To judge whether to build the highway, it must compare the total benefits of all those who would use it to the cost of building and maintaining it. To make this decision, the government might hire a team of economists and engineers to conduct a study called cost-benefit analysis to estimate the total costs and benefits of the project to society as a whole. Cost-benefit analysis have a tough job because the highway will be available to everyone free of charge. There is no price with which to judge the value of the highway. Simply asking people how much they would value the highway is not reliable. Quantifying benefits is difficult using the results from a questionnaire, and respondents have little incentive to tell the truth. Those who would use the highway have an incentive to exaggerate the benefit they receive to get the highway built. Those who would be harmed by the highway would have an incentive to exaggerate the cost to them to prevent the highway from being built. The efficient provision of public goods is therefore intrinsically more difficult than the efficient provision of private goods. When buyers of a private good enter a market, they reveal the value they place on it through the prices they are willing to pay. At the same time, sellers reveal their costs with the prices they are willing to accept. The equilibrium is an efficient allocation of resources because it reflects all this information. By contrast, the cost-benefit analysis do not have any price signals to observe when evaluating whether the government should provide a good and how much to provide. Their findings on the costs and benefits of public projects are rough approximations at best. 11-3 Common resources. Common resources like public goods are not excludable. They are available free of charge to anyone who wants to use them. Common resources are, however, rival in consumption. One person's use of the common resources reduces another person's ability to use it. Thus, common resources give rise to a new problem. Once the good is provided, policymakers need to be concerned about how much it is used. The problem is best understood from the classic parable called the tragedy of the commons. 11-3a The tragedy of the commons. Consider life in a small medieval town. Of the many economic activities that take place in the town, one of the most important things is raising sheep. Many of the town's families own flocks of sheep and support themselves by selling the sheep's wool, which is used to make clothing. As our story begins, the sheep spend much of their time grazing on the land surrounding the town called the town common. No family owns the land. Instead, the town residents own the land collectively, and all the residents are allowed to graze their sheep on it. Collective ownership works well because land is plentiful. As long as everyone can get all the good grazing land they want, the town common is not rival in consumption, and allowing the residents' sheep to graze for free causes no problems. Everyone in the town is happy. As the years pass, the population of the town grows, and so does the number of sheep grazing on the town common. With a growing number of sheep and a fixed amount of land, the land starts to lose its ability to replenish itself. Eventually, the land is grazed so heavily that it becomes barren. With no grass left on the town common, raising sheep is impossible, and the town's once prosperous wool industry disappears. Many families lose their source of livelihood. What causes the tragedy? Why do the shepherds allow the sheep population to grow so large that it destroys the town common? The reason is that social and private incentives differ. Avoiding the destruction of grazing land depends on the collective action of the shepherds. If the shepherds acted together, they would reduce the sheep population to a size that the town common can support. Yet, no single family has an incentive to reduce the size of its own flock because each flock represents only a small part of the problem. In essence, the tragedy of the commons arises because of an externality. When one family's flock grazes on the common land, it reduces the quality of the land available for other families. Because people neglect this negative externality when deciding how many sheep to own, the result is an excessive number of sheep. If the tragedy had been foreseen, the town could have solved the problem in various ways. It could have regulated the number of sheep in each family's flock, internalized the externality by taxing the sheep, or auctioned off a limited number of sheep grazing permits. That is, the medieval town could have dealt with the problem of overgrazing in the way that modern society deals with the problem of pollution. In the case of land, however, there is a simpler solution. The town can divide the land among the town families. Each family can enclose its parcel of land with a fence and then protect it from excessive grazing. In this way, the land becomes a private good rather than a common resource. This outcome, in fact, occurred during the enclosure movement in England in the 17th century. The tragedy of the commons is a story with a general lesson. When one person uses a common resource, she diminishes the other people's enjoyment of it. Because of this negative externality, common resources tend to be used excessively. The government can solve the problem by using regulation or taxes to reduce consumption of the common resource. Alternatively, the government can sometimes turn the common resource into a private good. This lesson has been known for thousands of years. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle pointed out the problem with common resources. What is common to many is taken least care of, for all men have greater regard for what is their own than for what they possess in common with others. 11-3b. Some important common resources. There are many examples of common resources. In almost all cases, the same problem arises as in the tragedy of the commons. Private decision makers use the common resource too much. Governments often regulate behavior or impose fees to mitigate the problem of overuse. Clean air and water. As we discussed in Chapter 10, markets do not adequately protect the environment. Pollution is a negative externality that can be remedied with regulations or with corrective taxes on polluting activities. One can view this market failure as an example of a common resource problem. Clean air and clean water are common resources like open grazing land, and excessive pollution is like excessive grazing. Environmental degradation is a modern tragedy of the commons. Congested roads. Roads can either be public goods or common resources. If a road is not congested, then one person's use does not affect anyone else's use. In this case, use is not rival in consumption, and the road is a public good. Yet, if the road is congested, then the use of that road yields a negative externality. When one person drives on the road, it becomes more crowded, and other people must drive more slowly. In this case, the road is a common resource. One way for the government to address the problem of road congestion is to charge drivers a toll. A toll, in essence, is a corrective tax on the externality of congestion. Sometimes, as in the case of local roads, tolls are not a practical solution because the cost of collecting them is too high. But several major cities, including London and Stockholm, have found increasing tolls to be a very effective way to reduce congestion. Sometimes, congestion is a problem only at certain times of a day. If a bridge is heavily traveled on only during rush hour, for instance, the congestion externality is largest during this time. The efficient way to deal with these externalities is charge a higher toll during rush hour. This toll would provide an incentive for drivers to alter their schedules, reducing traffic when congestion is greatest. Another policy that responds to the problem of road congestion, discussed in a case study in Chapter 10, is a tax on gasoline. Gasoline is a complementary good to driving. An increase in the price of gasoline tends to reduce the quantity of driving demanded. Therefore, a gasoline tax reduces road congestion. A gasoline tax, however, is an imperfect solution because it affects other decisions besides the amount of driving on congested roads. For example, the gasoline tax discourages driving on uncongested roads even though there is no congestion externality for these roads. Fish, whales, and other wildlife. Many species of animals are common resources. Fish and whales, for instance, have commercial value, and anyone can go to the ocean and catch whatever is available. Each person has little incentive to maintain the species for the next year. Just as excessive grazing can destroy the town common, excessive fishing and whaling can destroy commercially valuable marine populations. Oceans remain one of the least regulated common resources. Two problems prevent an easy solution. First, many countries have access to the oceans, so any solution would require international cooperation among countries that hold different values. Second, because the oceans are so vast, enforcing any agreement is difficult. As a result, fishing rights have been a frequent source of international tension among normally friendly countries. Within the United States, various laws aim to manage the use of fish and other wildlife. For example, the government charges for fishing and hunting licenses, and it restricts the lengths of the fishing and hunting seasons. Fishermen are often required to throw back small fish, and hunters can only kill a limited number of animals. All these laws reduce the use of a common resource and help maintain animal populations. 11-4. Conclusion. The importance of property rights. In this and the previous chapter, we have seen there are some goods that the market does not provide adequately. Markets do not ensure that the air we breathe is clean or that our country is defended from foreign aggressors. Instead, societies rely on the government to protect the environment and provide for the national defense. The problems we considered in these chapters arise in many different markets, but they share a common theme. In all cases, the market fails to allocate resources efficiently because property rights are not well established. That is, some item of value does not have an owner with the legal authority to control it. For example, although no one doubts the good of clean air or national defense is valuable, no one has the right to attach a price to it and profit from its use. A factory pollutes too much because no one charges the factory for pollution that it emits. The market does not provide for national defense because no one can charge those who are defended for the benefit they receive. When the absence of property rights causes a market failure, the government can potentially solve the problem. Sometimes, as in the sale of pollution permits, the solution is for the government to help define property rights and thereby unleash market forces. Other times, as in restricted hunting seasons, the solution is for the government to regulate private behavior. Still, other times, as in the provision of national defense, the solution is for the government to use tax revenue to supply a good that the market fails to supply. In all cases, if the policy is well planned and well run, it can make the allocation of resources more efficient and thus raise economic well-being. Summary. Goods differ in whether they are excludable and whether they are rival in consumption. A good is excludable if it is possible to prevent someone from using it. A good is rival in consumption if one person's use of the good reduces others' ability to use the same unit of the good. Markets work best for private goods, which are both excludable and rival in consumption. Markets do not work as well for other types of goods. Private goods are neither rival in consumption nor excludable. Examples of public goods include fireworks displays, national defense, and the creation of fundamental knowledge. Because people are not charged for their use of the public good, they have an incentive to free ride, making private provision of the good untenable. Therefore, governments provide public goods, basing their decisions about the quantity of each good on cost-benefit analysis. Common resources are rival in consumption, but not excludable. Examples include common grazing land, clean air, and congested roads. Because people are not charged for their use of common resources, they tend to use them excessively. Therefore, governments use various methods to limit the use of common resources.